Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are jumping right into a legendary tale of ancient politics, intense family rivalries, and honestly, some of the most epic world-building ever recorded. We're tracking the story of the Pandavas, taking a journey straight out of the ancient texts to see exactly how a seemingly impossible conflict was handled through diplomacy, and how an absolute wasteland was engineered into a radiant capital city. This isn't just some old myth, it's literally a masterclass in high-level strategy and resilience. So, let's dive into this. How exactly do you solve a royal family feud when both sides are incredibly powerful, heavily armed, and rightfully claim the exact same throne? I mean, that is the core, high-stakes political problem at the absolute heart of our story today. The mighty Pandavas and their cousins, the Kauravas, are on a direct collision course. But before a single sword is drawn, there's a massive architectural solution proposed to keep the peace. Section 1. The Royal Compromise. Navigating Ancient Politics. Now, to really get this compromise, we have to look at the before picture. The Pandavas, despite their incredible strength and royal bloodline, are currently living far from home as dependents in the court of King Drupada. And that creates an incredibly delicate diplomatic situation. Nobody wants to make the wrong move here. King Drupada strongly favors the Pandavas returning to their ancestral kingdom, but he very wisely hesitates to just outright demand it himself. Meanwhile, Yudhishthira, the eldest Pandava, shows his famous tact by pledging cheerful obedience to whatever Drupada commands. And then, of course, you have Krishna, the ultimate strategist, who agrees to entirely abide by Drupada's moral authority. It is a brilliant display of respect and careful maneuvering. They're aligning all their forces without ever coming off as aggressive. Section 2. A Hero's Welcome. The Return to Hastinapura. Let's see how this builds. With Drupada's blessing secured, the physical journey finally begins, and it is a massive event. The Pandavas aren't just sneaking back in through the back door. They're traveling with renowned figures, bringing the revered Kunti and the new bride Draupadi with them. And they definitely don't rush. After leaving Drupada's court, they spend days just stopping at various places along the way, strictly for pleasure and enjoyment. That projects total confidence. By the time they actually near the capital, King Dhritarashtra sends out a grand Kaurava welcoming committee, featuring mighty warriors like Drona and Kripa, and finally they enter Hastinapura to a reception of pure, joyous spectacle. The entire city is absolutely radiant with sightseers. And honestly, the citizens were just absolutely thrilled. Take a look at this quote straight from the text. "What good is not done to us today when the heroic sons of Kunti come back to our town?" The public support was just off the charts. The people viewed Yudhishthira as a protector, someone totally conversant with all the rules of morality. They literally felt as though the beloved King Pandu himself was returning from the forest. In fact, the citizens were so overjoyed, they wished that, by virtue of all their own good deeds, the Pandavas would stay in their town for 100 years. Section 3. The Desert Kingdom. The Fateful Decree. But they couldn't just live happily ever after. The tone takes a massive shift here as the Pandavas are formally summoned to the court by King Dhritarashtra and the revered elder, Bhishma. A political compromise has been drafted to prevent an all-out civil war between the Pandavas and the Kauravas. King Dhritarashtra looks right at Yudhishthira and issues this exact decree. "Repair you to Khandavaprastha so that no difference may arise again. Reside ye at Khandavaprastha, taking half of the kingdom." Now, on paper, getting half the kingdom sounds like a huge victory, right? A perfect compromise to ensure no one can do them injury, especially with the mighty warrior Arjuna protecting them. But there is a huge catch. And this brilliantly illustrates that staggering catch. The land they were just gifted, Khandavaprastha, it was an unreclaimed desert. It was entirely desolate. But the Pandavas, being true to their word and agreeing to the king's decree, accepted this totally barren half of the kingdom. And what they did next is legendary. They took this empty desert and decided, you know what? We're going to turn this into Indraprastha, a second heaven radiant like the celestial city of Amaravati. Section 4. Building Indraprastha. Engineering a second heaven. So the Pandavas, with Krishna leading the way, arrive in this literal wasteland and immediately get to work on a highly structured procedure. They knew they needed to ensure their new capital had both a solid physical and a deep spiritual foundation. First, they enlisted the assistance of the great sage Dwapayana to select a sacred and auspicious region right there within the desert. Second, they performed vital propitiatory ceremonies to bless the entire endeavor, and only then did they meticulously measure out a piece of land for the city. It was a perfectly calculated, intentional beginning. Now, I want you to just pause for a second and really visualize the sheer scale of the exterior defenses they built. The text describes a trench surrounding the city that was literally wide as the sea. Above that rose these massive white walls, reaching high up to the heavens, glowing like fleecy clouds or rays of the moon. They constructed gigantic gateways as high as mountains, with door panels resembling the outstretched wings of the mythical bird Garuda. And all along those walls, turrets were packed with armed men in constant training. It was an absolutely impenetrable fortress, entirely covered with darts and missiles resembling double-tongued snakes. Now, what's really fascinating here is the incredible ancient technology they deployed. Right alongside large iron wheels and sharp hooks, the battlements were equipped with things called satagnis. The text translates this to machines capable of slaying a century of warriors at once. I mean, wow! These were devastating ancient defensive machines mounted directly onto the city walls. They engineered a defense system that virtually guaranteed the missiles of their foes could not make the slightest impression on them. But, a truly great city isn't just weapons and giant walls, right? Inside, they created an absolute Garden of Eden. The contrast is just stunning. Within those heavy, brutal fortifications, they laid out these delightful, lush gardens. The source text goes into beautiful detail here, listing mango trees, champakas, blossoming encolas, and palm trees totally bent down with the weight of their fruit. There were artificial hillocks, bowers of creepers, and crystal-clear lakes filled with lotuses, swans, and Brahmini ducks. The groves constantly echoed with the sounds of peacocks and blackbirds. It was literally a paradise designed to provide absolute peace and joy for its citizens. So, what does this all mean for the actual people? Well, because of this incredible balance of ultimate security and lush prosperity, the societal impact was instantaneous. The Pandavas didn't just build a military base, they built a thriving hub of civilization. The new city's wide, excellently laid out streets attracted learned brahmanas well acquainted with the Vedas, highly skilled artisans, and incredibly wealthy merchants flocking in from every direction to earn wealth and set up shop. It became a booming metropolis entirely peopled with pious men. So here is the absolute crucial takeaway. The Pandavas took a political exile to a literal desert and turned it into the ultimate underdog triumph, building a city totally equal to the capital of the Nether Kingdom. But it leaves us with a really fascinating question to close on. By turning an unreclaimed desert into an impenetrable, paradise-like fortress filled with immense wealth and power, did the Pandavas actually secure a lasting peace with their cousins? Or did they simply set the stage for a much, much larger war? It's an absolutely brilliant piece of statecraft, but as anyone familiar with the epic knows, the building of Indraprastha is really only the beginning of a much grander story.